PodcastHeatWrestling.com. It's Derek Sabato here with the next edition of Todd is Pod, our first live event here on PodcastHeatWrestling.com. And Todd, we're coming off a big day yesterday. You were at the 2300 Arena with the tribute to the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal Sabu. What did you think of the event, and how good was it to see everybody there?
Well, Devious Derek, number one, how did you get off today? And number two, I want to know where's the music?
No,
thank him at all.
We want to give a thank you to Frank again for providing the Todd is Pod official theme song. He does it each and every week. He supplies it to us, and one of these days it'll actually play for us. But besides that, how was the tribute to Sabu yesterday?
It was pretty heartfelt. It was nice. I had to see a lot of the guys there. Rob Van Dam flew in. Bill Alfonso flew in.
Of course.
Scorpio was not there. He could not make it. Blue Meanie, Joel Gertner, Joey Janela.
Good for Joey.
Yeah, for him to come in. You just tell the people that were there wanted to be there. And there was a feeling of, it was not a sad night as much as in, hey, God, we love you kind of night. And people feeling good about their relationship with Sabu, about what he had brought to the table, and how he touched people. Yeah. Many people can bring up the same things, the same points of his sense of humor, his lack of recognition for what he actually did to change the entire industry. But that was really a recurrent theme throughout the entire night. And his giving, how he always gave to the underdog, gave money to the guys who couldn't afford it, gave a shirt to somebody to wear in the ring. There's a lot of things that people usually don't think about because they don't humanize him that much when you're talking about him as a worker. You only see him as a monster, but they humanized him a lot last night, and I thought that was really touching and great.
Getting to speak so highly of Sabu as we've done in the first couple episodes of Todd is Pod, I think has opened up a lot of eyes to people that don't realize what Sabu was backstage compared to what he was in the arena. So I think one of the cool things is, you know, it always is tough eulogizing people after their death, but it's been great to hear all these great stories about who the person that Sabu really was instead of the silent monster inside the ring in front of the camera.
Totally agree with you. And the boys knew it, obviously. All the boys knew it.
Yeah.
All the boys knew how funny he was. All the boys knew a lot of things that he did not want the public to know because that's the way he was raised. He was raised by the sheik who told him, no, this is your character. This is how you are 24/7. You do not break character for any reason whatsoever or you lose your career. And he kept that, you know, in the forefront always.
This week, we're talking about Ask Todd Anything. It is your questions we're going to be taking. Drop them in the chat, in the super chats, get to the front of the line. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. We'll make sure that gets up on the screen. And Todd, we're going to get started with the questions. And the first one is from Instagram, a wrestling historian. He asks you, who is your favorite ECW champion and why?
A favorite champion? That's like saying, who was your, what child do you love the most? There's no favorite. I mean, I love them all. I mean, I loved Sane's run because it was so, you know, integral in making us a bigger, you know, world kind of company. I love Sandman's run, Raven's run, Taz's run. I mean, they're all great runs. There's no greatest or favorite champion. There's like each one served their purpose and did it quite well. I mean, unfortunately, other than Van Dam's injury, that probably would have been his spot towards the end.
Yeah.
When he got injured, was unable to, you know, to do that.
When you think about the legacy reigns of ECW, to me, the one that stands out the most was Terry Funk at Barely Legal. And you were at that pay-per-view, obviously, in the infamous scene of Terry's family being in the arena when it happened. We're going to get into Barely Legal in a much more in-depth way, but Terry's win that night, how big a deal was that for you personally?
You know, I think the banquet the night before, which was going to be his, I guess, 99th retirement banquet.
Yes.
We retired for 9, but no, we gave him a beautiful, beautiful banquet the night before. Really honored him and feted him, and his whole family was there. And he was moved to tears more than once that night. And you saw everyone there. I mean, all the guys came. They were decked out, new jacket, a beautiful white long suit, styling, and like everybody was like on their game that night. And you can see it in his wife's eyes. You can see it in his children's eyes. It meant a lot to them. I'm sure they've seen him get award after award, over the years from the NWA and from this group and that group. But you could tell this banquet was different because all the guys who were talking about him in this particular instance weren't talking about him in wrestling per se. They're talking about what he meant to them as performers, what he meant to them as people, what he meant to them in their careers. He was so instrumental in elevating so many of them. And it came through in all the speeches. And I think that was really, really important. So the next night, him winning that title with about 3 seconds to go before the whole electrical system completely blew up at the arena was more important to me than the actual show itself or the actual match itself.
You sent me a picture the other day of you and Terry had signed it. Thank you for finding Paul Heyman, I believe it said. But without Terry Funk, the launch of Eastern Championship Wrestling was going to be a tremendously hard project. How influential was Terry with you early on in your run as ECW promoter?
Oh my God! Eddie brought him in for the very first. Eddie Gilbert brought him in for the very first TV taping. So he was going to be our color commentator to start, which is just his way of segueing into wrestling and getting in the ring. Just meeting him was an overwhelming kind of feeling because he seemed larger than life, and yet when you walked in, he was the most humble, kind of quiet. Like he was in the crowd, you wouldn't even know he was there. So who's that in the back? Oh, there's Terry Funk. You wouldn't even know. It was so quiet and humble, unassuming as I said. But he was a larger than life person. I mean, you meet him, you were in awe. What a tremendous, tremendous career he had. And who knew that we were going to give him a second career?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what ended up happening. I was so proud of that.
One of the cool things that are coming up at StarCast is a panel of Texas legends. It's going to be Dory Funk, Kevin Von Erich, I believe possibly Dustin Rhodes as well. And one of the cool things is it's going to be a bit of a tribute to the great superstars coming out of Texas. When you think about everybody who's come out of Texas, to me, the one that stands out the most is Terry Funk. And he was such a big, big, big part of even the Northeast wrestling scene after the fact, even after WCW closed and ECW closed. And he was always so nice and humble in independent locker rooms. He loved the business more than anything besides his family.
He and Dusty both. I mean, Dusty, believe it or not, even though he didn't come to work for us until much, much later, was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
Watching him on WCW, I guess it was, or NWA World Championship Wrestling back then, the angles he did with the Four Horsemen, and it was all his writing and creativity, and everything you saw was like, oh my God. I mean, it was so believable. He was such a tremendous performer. And you could get that emotion out of the crowd. Like you really wanted to back this guy, and you felt his pain. You wanted to be there for him. He was just an amazing, amazing guy. And the storylines he wrote, I loved and tried to emulate as much as possible. So yeah, I think Dusty and Terry both from Texas.
Dusty and Terry both would work in the Northeast independent scene after ECW closed, and both worked for 3PW, a promotion you were involved in with Jasmine St. Clair, with the Blue Meanie. And one of the questions we got from Brooke G, 023-17688, says, who's the one person you wanted in ECW or 3PW? Was there someone you always wanted to book for either of those companies and you never got the chance to do so?
Yes, actually, it was one person. When I was first started out doing Eastern, and I brought in Jimmy Snuka, and I brought in Magnificent Morocco, two guys who had this great feud to the WWE not long before that on television. And there's a third person there that I wanted to bring in as part of that triumvirate. The guy who would also have that great feud with Jimmy Snuka, and that was, of course, Roddy Piper. I was a big Piper fan. Oh my God, from the promos to everything about the guy just reeked of like, I gotta have this guy. He represents everything ECW I wanted it to be. Jimmy was such a great baby face, but he couldn't do the promos. He couldn't get things over the way Morocco could or Piper. I called Piper up actually. He was in Portland, living in Portland. I said, I'd love to bring you in. I told him, what I was doing here. I said, so far I'm just working with Jimmy and Don. And he said, well, you got two great fellas there. But I got to be honest with you. I don't think you can afford me, right? Not yet. You're doing a couple hundred people, and I'm a first-class ticket from Portland, Oregon, and I don't work cheap. I don't come cheap, and I don't do anything cheap. But I wish you a lot of luck. Hope to God you make it. And if you do, call me again. But, right now I don't think we can make a deal in terms of finances. And I understood that. I mean, my God, if I expect the guy to fly across the country, back of an airplane somewhere, work for $200, $200, but that was the one guy I would have loved to have brought in to have done recreate Piper against Snuka and to put some Piper Morocco stuff together. I would really love that opportunity. He's probably the only one I felt like I didn't get to bring in. We brought in pretty much everyone else there was at the time. I mean, it was, to me, what I wanted to see, whether it was Stan Hansen or Abby Abdul the Butcher, Sullivan, Road Warrior Hawk. I mean, all the people that I had admired watching, I really got to work with. That was pretty cool. And then 3PW, as you said, I brought in Jerry Lawler to work against Funk. I mean, you had Lawler, Funk's classic. You had Lawler against Dusty against Funk. And so I rotated those guys in and out at the top. And I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed the whole experience at 3PW.
There are those of you who don't know this, and you only know that Tod promoted ECW and was the founder of ECW, but you also did things before ECW that involved professional wrestling. One of my favorite pictures of you is you with Sting. Can you tell that story for us?
Well, at the time, yeah, I was very much involved with the Variety Club, which is a children's charity for providing wheelchairs and prosthetics and things for children in need whose families couldn't afford them. And it's an international charity, but chapters around the country and overseas. And for that one particular case, we were doing a charity event. I had known Gary Juster from starting out with Eastern, and asked me who could help me out and provide any talent for me. And next thing you know, I had Bruno Sammartino one night, and the next day I had Sting standing out there in his full gear, handing out papers and selling newspapers for charity and doing things like that. He was a terrific find. He was genuine. You see when he saw the kids and met the kids, every emotion he had was a genuine emotion. He wasn't going through the motions as certain other wrestlers had done in my past experience with the charity. He was the real deal.
The 119S, what was your reaction when you heard that ECW was going out of business?
Well, I guess I wasn't surprised. I was surprised it lasted as long as it did because it took a lot of money to keep it afloat for the last few years when the future just, everything about it said the writing was on the wall. I thought the writing was on the wall back in '97, to be honest with you. Because once we started the pay-per-view business, it felt like it was going to be impossible to keep the company afloat when you have to pay for those pay-per-views before you enter into get your check from the last one. So you're actually paying for 2 pay-per-views before you even see a dime. That's a lot of money. In addition to which, at that time, as we had grown, when we had grown, we're obviously on the radar of both Vince and Eric Bischoff, who were trying to pick our talent left and right. Vince, on one hand, was taking talent he had no intention of using. He just wanted to block us from using them. Just like dirty business, but hey, you know what? It's business. You got to accept and expect that that's the way it's going to be. It's a wrestling business or it's corporate America. That's the world we live in. So to me, the handwriting was kind of on the wall that there was going to be a shelf life here. And I tried to explain that to Paul, and I said, here's what's going to happen in the future. And his credit, like I said, he made it another 4 years, but look what it costs. A lot of money lost in that.
Do you think ECW stepping into pay-per-view led to its eventual downfall, or was it already going before pay-per-view?
I think that we ran before we walked. I think the excitement level of being able to tell our audience and tell our boys that are back, guess what? We're going on pay-per-view was overwhelmingly successful for us in terms of the feedback we got, in terms of the reaction we got from the boys around how much harder they worked, how the audience got behind us even more so trying to get that pay-per-view. But I think we weren't ready yet financially, and that was a big mistake. If we'd have waited maybe another year, I think this could have been different.
One of the questions we got, and now you brought up Vince McMahon, and I'm going to have to ask this question now. I was going to save it for later. But when Vince McMahon, Shane O'Mac from Reddit, the irony of that, when Vince McMahon won the ECW title in the WWE's version of ECW, could you have ever imagined that as a possibility?
That was as I like to tell you, the biggest work in the history of the business, as far as I'm concerned, that was done with such premeditation. Vince McMahon hated the fact, and probably still does to this day, that at his shows where he's spending his money, people in his audience are yelling ECW, ECW. It made him nuts. Everybody who worked there, or in the back or in the front, would always tell me, you have no idea how that pissed him off. He'd go, hated it. He tried to drown it out with other crowd noise or pipe something in. He hated the ECW chants. So I really believe that one way to get rid of the ECW chants was to have the crowd turn on ECW. How do you do that? One, you bring it back as an inferior product, and he did. I mean, the product he threw out there, with the zombie coming out for the first match, it was like from the first match you knew he was not going to do legitimate ECW. He wasn't going to have the guys come out and be themselves. No one is really a zombie. So the first guy to come walking out like that, to do that in a character, the first opening match on TV, right away you knew it was going to be a WWF product. So now they're still yelling ECW because it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
The only way he could turn them, he thought, was if he put the belt on himself and he was the ECW champion. People who hated him as much as they did, believe me, he was one of the most hated figures in all of, performer-wise wrestling, and brilliantly so. What a great heel he was. He came out with that belt on, hoping that people would stop yelling ECW and turn on the promotion. And then he could just bury the promotion and move forward from there. Only it didn't work out that way.
You were not a part of any of the ECW reunions with the WWF. Was that something that you chose not to be a part of, or do you ever hear from them?
I was never invited. Just like I was never invited to participate in their history of ECWs and their unauthorized versions, which is one of the reasons I wrote the authorized version in my book. Everything they did was done without speaking to me. I mean, how can you tell a story of a company's rising when everyone you're interviewing there wasn't even there at the beginning? I mean, it was myself and eventually Eddie Gilbert, and after that, Paul Heyman. But they started the company the day Paul arrived, I guess, or whenever he bought in. Yeah. And that's why it was unauthorized. There was no one there to tell the right story, the true story.
Have you ever?
That has nothing to do with the reunion shows, but in terms of the reunion shows, I was never even invited. No.
Did you ever watch the rise and fall of ECW?
I'm sure I did. I can't tell you that I recall it because it was years ago that it came out, but I'm sure that I did at the time.
I think, and if anybody in the comments wants to drop a note, dissecting the rise and fall of ECW sounds like an episode for Tod's Pod one day. And going through, I don't want to say line by line or scene by scene, but going through some of those statements and let's say tall tales of the growth of ECW from the point of view of some people that may or may not have been there, I think would be an interesting dynamic. And if you'd like to hear that episode in the future for Tod's Pod, drop a comment below. Also, make sure you're hitting like, subscribe. I see everybody in the chat. Remember, you have to subscribe to get your question asked. You can drop it in the chat. We will get to it. Super Chat's at the front of the line. We're going to get to the next question from Cheap Heat Spot Fest, fan of the show.
Eric, let me just tell you this. I know this is only our 4th episode, but I don't know about you, but I've been contacted.
Yes.
A boatload of wrestlers, including most ECW guys, but some not ECW guys, wanting to come on this podcast. I said, we're just getting it off the ground. We're just getting our feet wet. We're so not even ready to be prime time, as you say. I want to show the audience what Derek sent me yesterday.
Yeah.
As our sheet. I hope you can see this on here.
There's the format right there.
That was the format I received for today's show. So if you don't think we're already flying high, top of the line production, you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, we're not even close to that. But meanwhile, I am getting a lot of phone calls and a lot of people asking to come on as guests. And some of these people, believe me, are entertaining as hell. So stay with us. It's going to get, as Terry Funk once said after my first TV show, it's going to get better.
Can't get worse. The next question is from Cheap Eat Spot Fest. Why do you think TNA and Ring of Honor didn't use Too Cold Scorpio all that much in their formative years?
Boy, that's a great question. I mean, here the guy today still can outwork, I don't know, maybe 50, 60% of all the guys working for either of those companies.
Yeah.
But years ago, he could have outworked 95% of them. I mean, he really was one of those talented guys I ever personally, witnessed in my company. He could brawl, he could fly, he could tell a screw psychology. There was no part of the business he hadn't mastered. Well, the promo. But other than promo, he had really mastered the art of wrestling. He was the best, right there at the top as far as I was concerned. That's why we always put him in the matches, the highlight matches with like an Eddie Guerrero against Too Cold Scorpio, a Dean Malenko against Too Cold Scorpio. We always try to get the best wrestling talent in with him. At the same time, we throw him out there with Sandman as the public enemy for a brawl. I mean, he literally could fit in anywhere. He was like an MVP as far as I'm concerned.
When you think about, and I had this conversation with D'Lo Brown the other day on the Lowdown here on Podcast T Wrestling, where he talked about the influence that Scorpio had for him early on in his career and then getting to work with him in the WWF. Scorpio did it all, but was probably 2 to 3 years, possibly too soon through the business. 96, 97, 98. Man, him in the WWF and Attitude Era, and then finally growing into that. If you look at him in 1992 WCW, he's very much just an unbelievable talent. And I don't think the business was ready for what he could do in 92 with everybody else.
Was he ahead of his time? He was working in Japan, so he would work that style. They don't necessarily mesh with styles over here, but his style did. He could really, literally throw a mask on and go out there with any Japanese wrestler and put on a hell of a match. You go out there and brawl with Vader, whether it be in Japan or the United States, and put on a hell of a match. I don't know how much more I can explain to you that this guy is, like, as far as I'm concerned, as talented as anyone I've ever come across in my years in the business.
Speaking of talent, I Hate Mike Giller has a question for you. Where did you find Jay Sully, and how did he end up on commentary?
That's a great question. I'm not sure where I found Jay Sully. I think I found him at a bar around the corner from the studio, and he was sitting at the end of the bar with trying to pick up girls. No, I think Jay Sully came to us through Matt Radico, who was our cameraman, who's filming the shows for us. And he knew Jay. He suggested Jay. And Steve Weed, Wonderbar, sound guy, also knew Jay, I believe, and suggested Jay. And so, yeah, he had that booming voice, and everything boomed. There was a big right hand and a big clothesline and a big but had he had time to really stretch out and develop, he could have turned out to be quite a commentator.
Bruce from Reddit asks, how did your appearance with CZW, Cage Death 3, and the ECW Arena come together, and why was there no follow-up to it?
This is post-ECW for me. I was contacted by Donnie B, who was Nova's brother.
Yes.
Nova from ECW. And he said to me, they had this great idea of doing an invasion angle with the guys that were no longer working in ECW, which at the time I believe it was myself and Public Enemy and Sandman and Stevie Richards. I don't remember who else. Blue Meanie. I don't know who else was in that angle, but there were at least 6 of us or so in the angle. So I spoke with him about how we would do it and what it would cost to get it done. And then I heard from John Zandig. I spoke to John Zandig, and we had always had a decent relationship. He was now running in our building, and he said, "I like the angle. I think it can be great, but what I want to do is, I've got to have your word that Sandman's going to be sober." So how am I going to give him my word on that? Because first of all, I'm not sure you really want him sober. He works. No, I'm serious. He's a horrible. He'll tell you. He's a terrible worker sober. He's thinking about everything he's doing, and it's not the same fluidity to it. He needs those few cocktails to get him loose. When he's loose, he's twice as good in the ring. He's not as good in the ring when he's that tight and uptight. So you really do want him drinking. He said, well, if he's drunk, then I'm not going to bring him back. We do the angle. We came up from underneath the ring with a chainsaw. The angle was working out perfectly. At the end of the match, end of the angle, Sandman actually was going to turn into a face for CZW. He's going to be Xander's guy and turn on all the ECW talent. It's a nice angle. It's a well-written story. They got up on top of the scaffold and it looked fine to me. They were drinking beer up there. And when they got back down, Xander said he wouldn't be drunk. I said, he's not drunk. And he really wasn't drunk, to be honest with you. He had like a couple of beers, but he was far, 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 far from drunk. And Xander said, I'm not going through this. I'm done with this. And my honest opinion, he's only an opinion. It was too much money.
Yeah.
He didn't want to pay me and Sandman and Public Enemy and Stevie Richards, and there's a lot of people to pay, and we weren't like his talent who were making $100 a show. Like when I first started out, the town was making $100 a show too.
Yeah.
Now this is years later. This goes to W. None of us are going to come work for $100 anymore. There's a big budget for him, and I don't know that extra dollars were showing up at the box office more to pay off that. The whole idea is you want to pay off that talent with extra seats.
Yeah.
In the building. I don't think that really was a trade-off the way he had hoped it would be. And he played on the Sandman drinking thing, and I kind of think it was bullshit.
I worked for CZW at that show. I was a 16-year-old helper out. I was the timekeeper, and I will never, ever forget Sandman being at the top of that cage and cracking beers with Zandig, and then he looks at John across the ring and he goes, "What's his name?" He pointed at what was then Justice Payne. And he pointed at the wife beater and said, "What's his name?" And I saw the look in John's eyes change. And now, mind you, we ran a really long show. We started 2.5 hours late. By the time the Sandman and ECW got to the ring, it was 2:15 in the morning. It was a marathon for the wrong reasons. But I remember when we got through and the show finished and we're in the locker room and it's 4 a.m., John goes, "Yeah, he just couldn't stay sober." And I was like, this was a mistake. You were hoping you were going to get something, and you didn't get what you wanted out of it, and that was that. And I remember.
I'm really interested to hear that. You were how old again?
I was 16 then.
And you were in the locker room until 4 o'clock in the morning?
4 o'clock in the morning, yeah, because everybody's ride was. We were still stuck. We were stuck in Philly. I don't think I got home the next day at 6 a.m. That's how long we were, and that's how long it took to clean up the arena. It was a mess.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, but this really fascinates me. I never knew this about you before. So, yeah. What was your impression of the angle? Did it not get over? I thought it got over great.
Angle got over great. I think where John lost it was when Hack couldn't remember the names of the guys in the ring. And I remember Justice Payne, who was then the champion, going, "Well, he couldn't remember our names. He's a big shot. He's a big leaguer, all this shit." And I think it just went to John at that point of like, yeah, this isn't worth it. Now, mind you, we sold out the arena and had no idea we were going to sell out the arena. We turned people away that night and had no premonition that was going to happen. The next month, we were down 600. The next month, we were down another 200. If we had continued on the ECW angle, do I think we could have been I don't want to say drawing every month, but could we have kept up a level? I do. I just think egos got in the way, money got in the way.
Yeah. That's really an interesting point. I would say that it sold out because obviously word filtered out through enough of the smart fans that we were going to make an appearance that night.
Yep.
Once that happened, that sold the building out, obviously. Yep. I don't remember Sandman having the microphone and saying into a microphone, "Who's that guy and who's that guy and who's that guy?"
Yeah, he didn't say the microphone. He pulled the mic down and he looked at John and said, "What's his name?" And John's face instantly changed. And Sandman did this great promo and put over, this is the rebirth. This is, the good hardcore promotion that's going to, not replace ECW, that it's the next generation. And I think really at that point, it was just, Hack could have said anything at that point, and I think John had been done.
The sad part is, that's just who he is. Right. He to this day doesn't remember people's names. He's met people 100 times and he doesn't remember their names.
Yep.
I'll give you my co-author from the book, Sean. Help me.
Sean Oliver.
See, I don't remember names either. Sean Oliver. He's done, I don't know, 3-4 DVDs with him together, 3-4 hours at a crack. I bring him into a convention. I go, Sean, of course. And he goes, "No, how you doing, buddy? Nice to meet you." I said, "Dude, you've done like 4 DVDs with this guy. Maybe you have 4. What do you mean you don't know?" He didn't remember. That's just who he is. He can't help himself. He's very clever in that he calls all females girly. Hey, girlie, how you doing? Hey, girlie, what's up? That way, he's never gonna be accused of not remembering their name. So it's not his that he's doing that. The CCW guys trying to big league them at all. He's the exact opposite of someone who would try to big league somebody. He just doesn't remember and doesn't give a shit.
I never understood it. You get what you get with Hack, and it's exactly what we wanted out of the angle, and then they just shit on it, and it was like, okay, well, this is. I think selling out the arena told them that they're the big time. This is what it's going to be, and we don't need anybody else. And very quickly, it was discovered that was not the case. But speaking of girlies and Sandman, the next question: the blinding angle with Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, woman. With you in the ring with Sandman, was that one of your favorite moments in ECW?
Oh, undoubtedly. The blinding angle always will come up and be listed as one of my top 2 or 3 favorite angles we ever ran. It was that way because it was the one angle that even we got the boys, we got everybody. People legitimately believed he was blind or blinded. I had people who were sheet writers who are now people who have their own shows like this podcast, and I had people who were in the business calling me up nonstop for 2 weeks after that. How's Sandman doing? How's he doing? I said, how's he doing? He hasn't come out of the house. No one talks to him. He's not doing great. What can I tell you? So we absolutely played that as well as we could have possibly played that. I kept it such a tight circle.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I would say to the public enemy, hey, just between us, this is a work. We told no one. And so we brought him back that night. The bandages all over his eyes were pretty much ridiculous amount of bandages. He had done that himself. But that angle, that's got to be one of my all-time favorite angles. It really is. It was just so well done. And the whole thing with Nancy saying, woman saying, I'm bringing back I'm going to introduce my new protege, and it was really the Sandman again. I mean, every little piece of that was just so well put together, and the humor in there when he brought Peaches' wife out who had a breast augmentation done, and he's blinded, and she's saying, I want to go back with you. And he said, listen, don't worry about it. If you've gotten fat since I last saw you or anything, that's fine. I'll take you back. I mean, every little piece of that. We had the humor, we had the violence, we had all the different things that make up ECW.
When you talk about woman, and we've only been, this is like you said, our 4th episode, but woman always comes up and is always spoken about so highly, and how much she contributed not just to being outside the ring, but inside the ring. What place does she have in the annals of ECW?
Well, I can only speak for myself, and I can speak for actually the posse of Sandman, Scorpio, and Fonzie. We all revered her. I mean, we treated her with such respect. Even though she was younger, she was younger than I was.
Yeah.
But to me, she had such a place of reverence there because she had seen it all, done it all, and was intelligent about the way she did it. She was never accused of being a run around, a floozy, a this and that. No one ever said, "Oh yeah, she was so and so." Nobody ever knew her business. She knew how to do business the right way. She was just so intelligent like that. Her life and ending of her life was so tragic that I will tell you that was one of the most, to this day, most devastating things that I've ever gone through. Just hearing about it, Sam in the same way, we couldn't even speak for days. It was horrible, hard, and I could never ever forgive Benoit for what he did.
The impact of woman in wrestling, not just from ECW, but she also was helpful getting guys out of ECW into WCW for guaranteed contracts with Kevin Sullivan as well. Why do you think woman was able to do something that a lot of people accosted you for later on in your run in ECW?
Well, I don't know that she was, because the business is all, it's a work. I mean, for God's sakes, it's there's no espionage. I mean, anybody can pick up a phone and call anybody. It's not like you're not allowed to call somebody. They call it tampering, whatever you want to call it. Anybody. Yeah. If Eric Bischoff wanted to pick up the phone and call Randy Savage or Hulk Hogan, he could have. Or just call and say hi. Wherever the conversation goes from there, it goes from there. Nancy or Kevin, I mean, everybody talks to everybody in every company. So just act as though if you're in this company, then you got to stay with just the people there. You can't speak to the other people. That's ludicrous. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, people in Japan are talking to people in WCW. People in WCW are talking to people in WWF, ECW. They're all intermingled. So to put any kind of heat on that, stupid. Sure, Nancy would say, hey, listen, if you're interested, Kevin told me, tell me to give you a call. That's not the same thing as her saying, hey, come with me. I want to get you out of here. She wasn't trying to undermine the company. She was delivering a message. There was no subterfuge there. There really was such an overstated, overblown thing because people were looking for an angle. You want to make angles where we can make angles. That's where the money is.
Speaking of the money, James Weston left the comment, Exodus 4, chapter 20, Tod is God, so it is written, so it shall be. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now pass the collection plate. You can pass the collection plate at prowrestlingtees.com/Tod Gordon. Todd's got 2 shirts up right now. Tod is Pod and the Godfather of Extreme. Check it out. Buy the shirt. Bring it to Tod. He'd be happy to sign it for you. He's got a convention coming up in July. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're in Wildwood Convention Center for champions of the 90s wrestling, something along that line. If I botched that title, I apologize to Tommy Fierro, great guy that he is. I'll be there along with Francine and Sandman, the king and the queen of Extreme. Will be with me, the 3 of us together. We'll be doing autographs, photographs. I'll be doing book signings, whatever the case may be. But I'll tell you what, I like that Godfather Extreme shirt. That's a very cool shirt. I want one of those too. But so far, I can't even get the Tod is Pod shirt. So you guys are pretty cheap over there.
We are working on it, and make sure you're contributing and passing the collection plate by contributing by going to prowrestlingtees.com/Tod Gordon.
And fans, when he says he's working on it,
stacking everything up and making sure that everything is ready to go. And speaking of ready to go, we got a question.
How he works on things.
We got a question from Reddit that I got to ask you about because you bring up the same man. Jim002003 asks, did you see the Kurt Angle and Sandman controversy recently where Sandman called Kurt a pussy about the crucifixion angle?
Yeah, it wasn't a controversy. There was a controversy that night. Sandman referring back to it says, like, that was a pussy thing to do. It's like him just using that word. He's not actually saying he thinks Kurt Angle's a pussy. He's not going to disrespect the gold medal winner. Yeah. I assure you for a fact, he doesn't think Kurt Angle is a pussy. He's just using the word as a verb, as opposed to saying like, "Oh, he's worried about his shit, not getting done," or worried about. So he pushes that. But Angle's reaction to it, of course, 20 years later, after Sandman said it, it's kind of silly, but whatever it is, it is. I mean, people would go up to these wrestlers and they go, "Sandman said," or "Kurt Angle said," or when 20 years ago, like, in what context? And they get them to react to it. That's fine. I mean, that's what makes wrestling work. It makes the whole business go round. Controversy. Ask Eric Bischoff. And speaking of Eric Bischoff, do you know that if I was running WCW when he was, we'd have made it 84 weeks.
Wow. Shots fired at Eric Bischoff. I do want to ask you about that night, the crucifixion angle. Were you a part of the Kurt Angle? Did you meet him that night? And what was the goal of Kurt Angle with ECW?
Well, sure, we met him. Obviously, we met him. And I think Shane brought him in originally because he was from Pittsburgh, as was Shane. And he was thinking about his career. He was thinking about getting into professional wrestling. And since Shane had met him and told him he was a professional wrestler, and I guess Kurt was aware of that, he wanted to bring him down and show him his stuff, show him what ECW was all about. And he picked the night that there was an angle that Kurt was, vehemently against, and was so verbal, outspoken about it, and got real quiet 3 months later when they did the exact same angle with his new company, WWF, with the Undertaker putting somebody on the crucifix. I mean, the exact same thing, and all of a sudden they got very quiet about it. So that's kind of odd if you think about it. They're so verbal about it, then so quiet about it. Same angle, different company. One was already paying them, one wasn't.
Troy Target 123 from Reddit asks, did you know how crazy the heat would be when Shane Douglas shook Gary Wolf's halo in the ECW arena?
First of all, that's a great question. And the answer is hell no. I actually had 2 of our students planted in the front row to jump over the guardrail to come after Shane when this happened. They didn't even get to lift their legs before half the audience was already in front of them. No, did I not think that was going to, I had no idea it was going to get over that great. Right here is the office I'm sitting in right now, broadcasting, is the same place where Gary Wolf walked into with the halo saying, I did it. The halo's coming off, baby. I started taking it. I said, wait, before you take it off. And he went, what? I said, before you take the halo off. He went, what? I go, I've got a great idea, but you got to be able to work with me on this. I said, let me call Paulie. He's sitting here right here. I called Paul up and said, listen, he's got the halo off, but how about if he doesn't take the halo off and no one knows he has the halo off? And blah, blah, that, which led into the whole angle with Shane, which, wow, was that fire. Oh, my God, was that a fire angle. And wait, it's 35 years later. They're still working over that angle, doing matches all around the independent scene today. Yep. Based on that one angle 30-something years ago. So, yeah, I never knew it was going to be like that in the building. But Shane almost couldn't get out of there alive that night. That was crazy.
When you think about ECW fans, were always regarded as the smart fans. And they know and they're in on it and all this. But that was a legitimate reaction. You had, at the time, not Atlas Security, but the Philadelphia Police Department working the rail. What's the reaction from the police department when that all happens?
Well, they, like any riot scene, I mean, they were looking at a potential riot scene. And one of the things, believe it or not, that made that work so perfectly was the way Gary sold it. What he did was, I mean, normally when you get thrown down, your natural reaction is to put your arms out, to brace yourself from falling. So not to do that, he purposely stuck his hand into his pocket. So when he was shook and fell, he went and fell to the side with his hand in his pocket so that he could not brace and protect himself. So it looked so devastating because there's like a crippled man falling to the floor with no way of helping himself or protecting himself. Gary's a little subtle thing like that. And that's all of wrestling, by the way. Yeah. The little subtle things you don't realize someone does are the different angle being a great angle, a good angle, or a lousy angle. And no one realizes how subtle those little things are.
Were you amazed that Shane was able to garner that reaction as heavily as it was on something that no one really knew it was a work or it was a shoot?
No, because no one knew it was a work. That was the best angles always are the ones where you don't realize they're angles. Whether it's Sammy and blinding, whether it was Gary and the halo, I mean, those are the ones that are the most successful because no one's expecting it. No one's saying, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen," or "I predicted that a month ago." No one's predicting that Gary's legitimately had a broken neck and legitimately in a halo for 2 months. No one predicts he's actually wear a halo for an extra month and not come out of the house for an extra month just to get an angle over. That's how dedicated our locker room was. That's very unusual too. All through my experience, I've been in this business, I don't know how many years, 30-something years, 35 years. It's very unusual to see locker room is that willing to do stuff like that, sell something like that, to get that angle over like that. Let alone how small our audience was compared to the kinds of audiences that are being played today.
Speaking of audiences, Dr. Love 1984 asks, what is your best New Jack story?
Best what?
Best New Jack story.
Here's a question for you.
On air.
New Jack story. There was a night we were all partying in the Loser Lodge. I believe myself, Tommy Rich, Sandman, Scorpio and Fonzie, and New Jack. And New Jack had to leave around 11:30, 12 o'clock. He was going to do a radio interview for not Bootsy Collins, but for a big name guy who's on the radio overnight in Philly, a dance club. He goes, put on that station. You'll see I'll be on there. So we put the station on, and we're not even thinking about it. We're just hanging out and partying. And all of a sudden, around 2 o'clock in the morning, New Jack says, "Oh, and shout out to my boys, Tod Gordon and Fonzie and Sandman and Tom Rich up there in Proud doing coke in the hotel room." Blah, blah. And I went, "What did he say? What?" And we're all like, "What did he just say?" Broadcast radio. and you just never knew what would come out of his mouth. He was a trip and a half, and funnier than hell.
I talked with D'Lo Brown last week about his time at Smoky Mountain Wrestling with the Gangsters, which was New Jack and Mustafa Siad, and had nothing but great things to say about New Jack. But New Jack is a very controversial person in this business. What is your opinion on the legacy of New Jack?
I think that his being a controversial person is the reason anybody's going to ever remember him. He could not be just another worker. I mean, he wasn't going to go out there and have a great, wrestling match, and to just go out there and be another brawler. He just been another guy. He didn't want to be just another guy that could be replaced. Can you get me a Barbarian? No, have a New Jack. He's available. He didn't want to be somebody that could be switched off for someone else. He didn't want to be that guy. He wanted to be somebody that said, whoa, you want New Jack? Now you're talking about a whole different level of whatever work of matches. Import. And he made himself stand out that way. A lot of it was bravado. Whole, that's right, I've killed 35 guys. You could be 36. I mean, that was Jack. But he was legitimately a crazy, tough guy. Don't get me wrong. And he would legitimately come up and smack somebody's block off, basically. I mean, outside the ring. But he loved that controversy. That's how he had a career. Without it, I think he would have been just another interchangeable block. He did not want to be forgotten. He wanted to be remembered. And he is.
We got one last question from Matthew Rodriguez, who popped into the chat. Question for Tod the God. Do you think Timeless Tony Storm could have worked in ECW? And would you have put her in the ECW?
I'm not hearing you well. You have to say it more time.
Do you think Timeless Tony Storm would have worked in an ECW environment back in the 90s?
I've just really become aware of her, and I've only seen like maybe one or two things that she's done. I'd have to see her more to have any kind of a feel for that. I'm really behind on my AEW, but now that we're doing the podcast, I'm planning on trying to get caught up and see more of these guys and get to know their stuff more. But until I've seen enough of them, I don't want to comment on people because I don't think it's fair. So me saying, so one JT Smith match, what did you think? You good or you're screwing up? Well, and wait a minute, did he screw up on purpose in that match? Because he did that plenty to get the "you fucked up" chance. Did he? You can't. I don't have enough of the picture to give a legitimate comment. And believe me, once I do, I have no problem critiquing, complaining, or putting somebody over, or knocking them down. But right now, I don't have enough picture for her to say that.
Matthew will work on that. I'll send Tod some clips of Tony's promos, some of her work, and we will get back to you on that one. Last question of the show before we wrap up today. Derek from Podcast Heat asks, are you ready for next week? We're going to be talking about Hardcore Heaven 1995. Shane Douglas is about to leave for the WWF, become Dean Douglas. The Dudley Brothers, not the Dudley Boys, but the Dudley Brothers debut. The Gangsters are in the main event in their in-ring debut for ECW and the first tie-pay death match between Ian Rotten and Axel Rotten, and a whole lot more.
If that's the show I fired Shane on, I believe it is, I've got great stories about that show, yeah.
Tune in next week here on podcastheatwrestling.com. We're going to be covering Hardcore Heaven 1995. Leave your comments and questions below for the show. We will get to them. Tod, next week. Oh, good.
Yeah. I apologize to my fans and audience because, we're doing a morning show here, so I did not have my cocktail. Hopefully we'll get back to the original concept next week. We'll go back to our cocktails with the Extreme Cocktail Hour, and we'll get things rolling again.
Yes, we will. Tod joined us today from Carver Reed in Philadelphia. It is a pleasure to get him during his workday, looking so official with the suspenders and the tie. Now, I'm just sitting here in a black T-shirt, but you can get your T-shirt now at ProWrestlingTees.com/Tod Gordon. Tod is Pod shirt and the Godfather Extreme shirt is available. Get Tod a follow on Instagram and X at ECW Tod Gordon. I'm Derek Sabato, and we are out of time. We'll be back next week with ECW Hardcore Heaven 1995. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you then.